Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So today we're going to be talking more about the Acolyte. It's going to be a fun one, we have some speculation, and then we're going to be looking at some news.
Let's do this!
So there's been a lot of talk in recent days about the possibility of the Acolyte Season 2. Leslye Headland said she wants the opportunity, but she's not relying on it. In a couple of days we'll find out how Episode 8 is going to wrap up the first season, and she did promise it stands on its own if that second season is not granted. If they do more with this show, please make it Sith-oriented, and I mean truly Sith-oriented. She spoke about possibly exploring young Palpatine, which could be very exciting, and I would love to see James Luceno collaborate. Nonetheless, putting that aside for just a moment, we will return to it near the end of the video. I went back and rewatched the trailer for the upcoming Star Wars video game Eclipse. A game in the very early stages of development over at Quantic Dream, and one which some gaming media sources think may never see the light of day. But a year or so ago, the studio insisted it's making good progress, and it's high on their list of priorities. Now just like the Acolyte, this game takes place during the High Republic, but much earlier in the timeline before the Acolyte. And I have a theory I want to present you with. The Lucasfilm story group may have already hinted Eclipse is a direct prequel to the Acolyte. Not only is the game titled Eclipse, which evokes the dual nature of the twins, one identity and two bodies, when Torben was talking about symbionts, but it could also refer to two celestial bodies above Brendok, which I noticed seemed to appear in the Eclipse trailer. With all of the discussions going on about the Acolyte, I'd forgotten about Star Wars Eclipse, but I predict there is probably a very strong link. Both the game and the Acolyte were developed near the same time, and the Lucasfilm story group, their responsibility is to hold things together to make some coherence between different projects. The mysterious creatures, which appear at the end of the trailer with one of them emerging from the dark liquid, the Zoran, may be somehow connected to the witches of Brendok and dark side magic that may have been used to manipulate midichlorians and life. And I've got to say, this world looks like it's either Brendok or one of the planets within the system Brendok is in. We might see Brendok before the events of the Great Hyperspace Disaster. I'm starting to see little bits of connective tissue. What do you guys think? I will admit the visuals are not identical, but they're both very similar. They evoke the same kind of imagery, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So let's say there's not an Acolyte Season 2, which seems to be a popular opinion going round, taking into account fan reception, viewership, that kind of thing. I really don't know. I'm personally in the dark on this. But even if we don't get an Acolyte Season 2, Star Wars Eclipse could definitely give us a contextual prequel to the show. There was a pretty major leak for the game back in January of 2023. Basically, the mysterious species, the Zoran, are central to the plot. This was first discussed on Sacred Symbols podcast. Essentially, the protagonist of the game is of this species and her name is Sarah, a high-ranking member of the humanoid Zoran species. The Zoran are in control of their own empire, which is starting to stretch out, and their reaches all across the galaxy in the 2 centuries before the Phantom Menace. The Zoran species thrive on their own military conquest, and take great pride in being one of the most technologically advanced species in the entire universe. There is a rule in the species that upon marriage the couple combines their military rank and command and rules as one military body, and this is where the conflict comes in. Very much in line with Quantic Dream, the decisions you make lead to the outcome of the narrative of the game, your experience as Sarah. There is tension in her marriage and being at odds with her husband, especially on their opinions of how to govern. Not much else is known. Sarah is a brutalist, believing in the Empire's strong warfare and colonization. On the other hand, her husband Zendo is a bit more apprehensive. We don't know all the details on how it's going to connect, but I suspect in typical Lucasfilm fashion, there will be some kind of connective tissue between the game and the live-action show, and hopefully more world building. So on the subject of the Acolyte, and looking at a potential Season 2, there is a wide array of fan opinions on if they should go about this, how they should do it differently to the first season, if they should have a new showrunner, a new writer, that kind of thing, and how a continuation should be dealt with. I want to give you a different perspective. Before the Acolyte dropped, we heard about a lawsuit where there was going to be multiple seasons. They might do what they did with Andor, which I'm going to talk about a bit later in the video, and instead of doing 3 or 4 seasons, in the case of Andor it was originally 5, reducing it down to 2, and it's not as simple as you think. There are many considerations, including Disney and Lucasfilm's priorities. Well, I came across a very good article which lays out the exact reasons a second season is looking increasingly unlikely, and it's got nothing to do with the media, when they were talking about review bombing. It's not the faults of fans on social media, but instead simple business. Estimates of the cost of The Acolyte put it at $180 million, and that is spread across 8 episodes, many of them around the 30 to 35 minute mark. When you analyse the data, even some of the more flattering statistics, that is still a wild amount of money compared to viewership. It is nowhere near Disney and Lucasfilm projections and where they wanted the show to be with 1 episode to go. And while you'll find a lot of impassioned opinions, a lot of hyperbole regarding the series, I think we can all agree, in comparison to the returns, the amount spent cannot be justified. And that is the most important metric, which is going against a renewal of the show. That's why I'm baffled they haven't made a Book of Boba Fett Season 2, because like I said, even though fans had mixed opinions on it, the finale did more numbers than Mando Season 2. If the minutes watched and the viewership were a breakout smash hit, it may have been worth spending that for another season. But at the moment, that doesn't make sense. From a business perspective, I can't see Disney with an increasingly tighter budget, and even Bob Iger saying we're focusing on the cinema side of things, and he said we're scrapping anything that doesn't work on the platform. I really don't think The Acolyte has a good chance, at this point, of another season. Because even the best metrics are just looking at social media engagement, not direct viewership from the Disney Plus platform, which is very hard to quantify. Disney doesn't give us those numbers. But Nielsen indicates its premiere was half the viewership of Ahsoka and 75% lower than Mando. It's the second least watched show. And you might be saying, well, what about Andor? Andor didn't do so well in viewership, but it was very well received, very highly praised, and it was renewed at a time before Disney was cracking down as harsh as they are now. But that is one thing that might be going for The Acolyte Season 2. Andor did get a second on a reported $250 million budget, but that may have been swayed by the quality and fan response. And there's actually a contrast between what Leslye Headland said and what Tony Gilroy said about their respective shows. In recent interviews, Leslye Headland doesn't seem surprised about the backlash over The Acolyte, whereas Tony Gilroy said this about Andor, which had low viewership but high praise. I was surprised. I thought the show would go the other way, that we would have this gigantic, instantaneous audience that would just be everywhere, but that it would take forever for non-Star Wars fans to get involved in the show. The opposite happened. We ended up with all the praise, all this deep appreciation and understanding from really surprising number of sources, not necessarily diehard Star Wars fans. And now we're chasing the audience. But Andor and The Acolyte are 2 fundamentally different shows, created under very different circumstances. We just don't know the kinds of conversations going on behind closed doors. And you never know, I might post this, and then in a week or 2, they might come out and say, The Acolyte is being renewed. But as Forbes point out, from a business standpoint, it doesn't make much sense. There's a stronger case to be made about Obi-Wan Kenobi based on metrics for that show. So what about the argument for? A few signs of hope for Season 2 would be the following. Leslye Headland clearly has a story mapped out for future seasons. Disney does have a lot riding on the High Republic. They might decide to count their losses and just give it another go. They've renewed other shows for Season 2 like Andor and Ahsoka, which also cost a lot. So it's not a case of being pessimistic, it's just keeping in mind a realistic outlook. But what do you guys think? Do you want to see an Acolyte Season 2? Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video.